Great. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Robin Strong, and I'm going to talk to you this evening about how professional investors use data and analytics to improve their performance. Now, if your mind is racing ahead and you're thinking AI, supercomputers, advanced algorithms, there's absolutely a place for those techniques in the investment industry. But what I'm going to talk about is much more aligned to the techniques used in elite sport. And that's where I'm going to start. Certainly, some of you may be old enough to remember this. This is the men's singles final from Wimbledon in 1980. And the reason I wanted to highlight that, if you look at the scoreboard in the background, really that's all the data you get about that event. There's no analytics, there's nothing, it's simply a measure of the score. Whereas I've grabbed a few screenshots from this year's Wimbledon final. There's pages and pages of analytics. You can see the average serve speed, the number of points won at the net, the average distance covered per point. And that's extremely interesting. If you're a real tennis geek, those stats might really enhance your viewing pleasure, but really they're only of practical value to the athletes themselves. But the thing I wanted to differentiate here is the difference between measures of outcome and measures of skill. So most of those stats are actually measures of outcome. They're simply statements of something that's already happened. And if you're involved in any sort of coaching, you'll be very familiar with the phrase that you should focus on the process, not on the outcome. And so actually, if you think about tennis, you can break that down into a set of skills, and those skills can be improved. So here's a few examples. Obviously, there are more skills than that. I've put some examples down there that you should all be very familiar with, the concept of getting better at serving, etc., etc. And if you get data that you can collect in the same way that I showed you, let's say your serve wasn't working particularly well and you're an elite sportsman, the first thing you're going to do is head down to the practice court and work with your coach on your serve. So you have the ability to identify granular units of effort, skills that we would generally refer to, that you can work on and improve with the goal of ending up the better outcome. So what's that got to do with investment management? Well, you have to think about, what does performance mean in an investment context? Well, there's a chart over the last 12 months of a UK equity fund. You can see it's up by 15.9%. That might sound quite good. Actually, when you look at the FTSE index, which is the market, it actually outperformed the market. Great. And if you look over a longer period of time, it actually outperformed quite significantly. And we would say that the performance of that particular fund is up 8%, just over in 3 years. So if we think about the same sort of techniques, if we looked at, say, the game tape of a tennis match, we can collect all of the data and the stats that we can analyze to identify the skills involved. We can do the same thing for an investment manager. So if we take just one investment, just one particular stock, for example, that a manager invested in, they might start with a little small amount they've invested in. They like it, they buy a bit more, and over time, they're going to maintain and manage that investment based on the data they get every day. They're going to read news, they're going to get research, they're going to make decisions on products and whether they're going to be successful or not for those businesses. And so what you get is a game tape. Instead of a tennis match, it's a game tape of an investment. And if you think about trying to understand the decisions involved in that, it's not just which stock do I buy it and then I sell out again. There's actually a lot more involved in managing that investment. So for example, when do I buy it? I found the stock I like. Do I buy right away? Am I going to wait till their next earnings report? Do I wait to see if their new product is very successful in a particular market? When do I buy in? How quickly do I build up that position? Do I buy all immediately, or do I buy a little bit, wait and see what happens, build that up over time? How much do I buy? Is this the biggest holding in my portfolio? Is it something a bit more modest? Am I going to adjust that over time? You saw these little arrows along the way. I sold a few, I bought a few more. Why? There was obviously a reason behind doing that. Again, as I said, it could be news, it could be information about the product. How long does it take me to get out? When I decide finally I've had enough, do I sell it all immediately, or do I gradually do that over time? And when do I finally exit? So these are all individual decisions that the manager has to take. So what a fund manager is really doing is making a lot of decisions. And so out of those decisions, we can understand the skills of the manager. So when I put the tennis skills up earlier, and you saw serving and so on, I can do the same for investment management. I can look at the data, I can look at the game tape, I can collect all of that data together, and I can analyze which of these particular styles or these particular decisions I'm good at doing and which ones I'm not. And then the idea being much like a sportsman, I can work on the decisions that are less effective for me and try and make them better, and I can try and do more of the things that I'm good at. So what I'm trying to work out is, what are my right decisions, what are my wrong decisions, what do they have in common? And there are different ways to assess those skills. So remember the three little arrows, and there was two going up. I could look at those ads, as we call them, when I bought more shares of something I already owned, and I can say, well, does that generally work? Let's look at all the ads that I've ever done. Well, how would I compare if they're effective or not? Well, I could look at each ad and I could roll that forward and let's say look over 6 months and see if that's successful. Or I could say, well, what if I didn't do them? What would that look like? So there's lots of different ways of trying to decide. In the same way, there's no single formula for coaching tennis or golf or anything else. And what I'm trying to work out is how often am I right with these decisions, and hopefully that I make more money when I'm right than I lose when I'm wrong. But there's one further thing. By getting data about my past decisions, that's relatively straightforward. Every fund manager will have a history of the decisions they've made, an accounting system or something that keeps track of all of these. And that data can be analyzed, and I can use that to identify decisions. But there's one key bit of data that allows us to go one stage further, and I refer to it as intent capture. It's understanding the why. Why did I do that? And that's a very important piece of trying to understand why decisions were taken, because if I can collect that information, I can look at when I did this because of reason code A, if you like, versus reason code B. That allows me to be much more granular with the information and identify when my decisions are adding value and when they're hurting value. And it gives me a very sort of unique pool of information. Right? That is unique to me, my decisions in my portfolio. It's not data that anybody else has access to. In the same way that I can get data, I can get research about Apple from 100 different places, and so can anybody else. And so there's a little example at the bottom. The manager added more shares. That was the two little up arrows. So why? What was the reason that you bought more? You liked their latest earnings report. You think their new product's going to be a success. Some sort of reason behind that. How confident are you in that decision? And I'll come back to confidence later. Whose decision was it? Was it me? Was it the analyst? Was there a team involved? Did we all agree? So it can capture situational and organizational aspects as well, which are very important in determining when I make good decisions and when I make bad decisions. And ultimately, I'm trying to figure out, what do my winning decisions and my losing decisions have in common? And analyzing that is key to improving performance. Exactly the same as in my tennis match, I'm trying to figure out, are my forehands, winners, or my backhands winners? Am I letting myself down in my serve, etc. One thing that's very important and is often overlooked is when you look at that data, how do you get that data? Who presents that data? Is someone analyzing it for you? A coach, right? So no elite sportsman would not have a coach. Generally, a trusted expert. So, in the tennis world, that would be like hiring John McEnroe. Andy Murray's available these days, as your coach to try and analyze the data, understand your strengths and weaknesses, and help you get better. But this is where most analytics projects fall down. They get as far as producing lots of analysis, and then they stop. And really, the analytics are going to give you a diagnosis. But really what you're looking for is a treatment plan. It's the so what aspect. And I think there's a lot of projects I've been involved with where the objective has been to produce good analytics. It's not actually to end up with a better or measurably better outcome, which is really what all finance professionals want to do. And so the way that this works, there's no sort of silver bullet. It's really about a program of continual improvement. I think it was Dave Brailsford who started Team Sky, the cycling team. Instead of looking for that magic 100% gain, he was looking for 100 little 1% gains, little individual areas where you can get better over time, where you can measure how your performance improves. And it's exactly the same in the finance world. There's no sort of low-hanging fruit anymore because everyone else has been trying to get better for years and years. So ultimately, the way to make better decisions involves a degree of behavioural change. So surely you can just make better decisions. Wouldn't that be straightforward in the same way you can hit better serves? Well, actually, it turns out it's very difficult to make better decisions. And so this slide, Thinking Fast and Slow, you may be familiar with the book, 2011 book by Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner, who sadly passed away this year, I believe at the ripe old age of 90. And what he identified is actually the human brain has almost two completely different ways of thinking. What he refers to as System 1 brain. Right? System 1 brain it's the immediate decisions, it's emotionally charged. It happens almost instantly without thinking about it. It's low effort, and your brain is constantly making decisions like that, but actually it takes shortcuts to get there. But you have a System 2 brain, which is your much more structured, heavyweight decisions. That's where you analyze bits of data, but that introduces quite a lot of cognitive load. It's hard work. You can't think that way all the time. There just simply isn't enough time in the day. But actually, most of your decisions are taken by your System 1 brain. So most of them are emotionally charged. They're based on past experiences that you've had, desires for future outcomes, and often they short circuit what you would think would be a very rational, logical process. And so the work that Daniel Kahneman did, essentially in describing cognitive biases, mistakes that you make in these shortcomes, in taking these shortcuts. And that's fundamental. If you're taking shortcuts in the financial markets, that's perhaps not the best way to make decisions. So if you can actually understand your biases and address them, then you can make better decisions that have a very measurable outcome because it's involved in financial markets. Now, I don't intend to go through the enormous list. The last time I looked, there was over 180 different documented cognitive biases, many of which affect decisions taken in financial markets. So I'm just going to talk about the first couple on that list. So overconfidence, it's a really interesting one. You know, it probably conjures sort of images in your mind of flash, confident, city traders. But actually, overconfidence is often just having a preconception that you're going to do it anyway and not necessarily going through the right due diligence. And a number of projects I've been involved with, what we've done is asked the portfolio manager when they've made a decision, how confident are you? Give them a 1 to 5 scale, and then gone back and looked at how effective those different decisions were. And what's really interesting is frequently confidence level 4 decisions outperform confidence level 5 decisions. And the reason that we normally ascribe to that is the fact that if you're really confident, you maybe don't go through the right due diligence. You skim over some of the analysis that you'd really do just to make sure you're absolutely right. But if you're not quite sure, you maybe just make a couple of extra checks. You're slightly more diligent and you make better decisions as a result. And the second one's the endowment effect. And this is well documented. I found over 3,000 separate citations when I looked online, so I wasn't going to try and summarize all of that. But the endowment effect basically says that you ascribe a higher value to something that you own. And if you think about an investment manager, you own shares in a company. You often overvalue and you sort of fall in love with the stock. You bought it, a couple of years ago. It's gone up and up and up. It's sort of plateaued. It starts going down again. You're oblivious to that. You're still lingering on the reasons that you bought it and the fact it went up in the first place. So it actually makes it hard for you to sell and get out of that stock when you probably should. And so I can summarize really almost all of the biases in a couple of nice simple pictures. This one here, we fear future regret. FOMO is probably the modern day term for this, but it's either not being involved in investment and jumping in with the crowd when maybe it doesn't suit your investment style in the first place. It's maybe hanging on to something when you're worried, if I sell it, I bet it ends up going up. So, that's a natural human instinct. And then the second one, we are hardwired to avoid loss. A loss is far more painful than a gain. And, it's the sort of thing you buy 2 stocks, one's gone up 10% and one's gone down 10%. You sell the 10% winner and think, that's great, I'm in profit, I've made it, it feels good, it feels nice to be in profit. The 10% loss, I don't really want to sell that and make a loss, I'll hold on and it's bound to recover. and then it's down 20%, and then you sell down 30%. And these are natural human emotions that occur in all walks of life, but they're particularly visible and measurable in financial markets. And so one of the things that we can do is actually use something called a nudge, which has become the sort of industry accepted term. There's a book by Richard H. Thaler that was published in 2008, another Nobel Prize winner, and his book was called Nudge. So the concept of a nudge is a little, a stimulus to take action, and that could be simply to record information. It could be, in our world, it's time to make a decision. It's not trying to tell you what to do, it's telling you when to do something. And so it's very common to build some sort of nudge into the sort of day-to-day workflow. Now that nudge could be an email that comes when a particular event happens. It could be an alert on the smartphone. It might simply be when you have the team meeting every Monday morning, you go through a documented set and you collect information and you try and form an assessment. And the idea of that is if you can alert someone the right way and ask them some questions that are maybe involve some kind of structure. That could be a form to fill in, it could be individual questions. It almost triggers system 2 thinking, that analytical structured system that allows you to make better decisions. And this has become a very widespread technique across the industry. So here, a really simple example there. You can easily look at the data for stocks that you've held, and you can look at, for example, at certain times when they've dropped for certain lengths of time, and you can find a tipping point. When's that tipping point? When actually, if it's down by say 15% and it's been like that for 4 weeks on average, that's my point where I need to get in or get out. You can use a nudge to alert the users to make a decision at this point. You can capture what they do, and then you can subsequently analyze that. And that would be exactly the same as going back and saying, okay, let's look at every time you had a serve in this particular context, and after the fact, we can go back and we can analyze it and break that down and work out what would be the most effective decision to take. So you're really building a unique library of decisions taken by an individual manager that allow them to improve the performance. So just to sort of summarize, investment management, there's a set of skills that can be individually measured, assessed, and developed in exactly the same way as that you have skills that you would use in elite sport. By doing a sort of data-driven analysis, you can essentially construct that sort of unique library of decisions. If you know a particular decision is effective 8 times out of 10 in this circumstance, but only 3 times out of 10, that allows you to make a better decision. You're forearmed when you come to that point in the process. The challenge is user engagement. People don't like having to answer lots of questions and fill in forms and so on. And that's the single biggest challenge with doing this. So I don't know if you've ever gone to some sort of a news site where someone sent you a link and it says, before you can view this page, answer these questions. Have you seen any adverts recently for Visa, MasterCard, or Amex? And you have to answer 3 or 4 questions and then you get access to the content. That's slightly annoying. Imagine, if your job is to make investment decisions all day long, and every time you make a decision, you get sort of interrupted by this. So the trick is to design something that's not blocking. It doesn't block the user's process. You could capture that at the end of the day or first thing in the morning or get an assistant to do it. It's trying to identify the right way to capture that input, which is incredibly valuable for later analysis. But the outcomes are phenomenal. The sort of research that's been published tends to show an average of about plus 1.6% per year of improved performance. If you remember that first fund, it was up just over 1% in a year, so that would more than double their outperformance of the market if that could be attained across the board. So this is a very effective technique. It's been proven in a number of contexts and has improved performance for many investment managers. Thank you.